By doing the interview project that we did last week, I learned a lot about not only what leadership should be like, but the realities of it and the strengths that people may possess and even some of the challenges of it. I feel like Christian leadership isn't about just having an in-charge title telling people what to do. It's about knowing your own core values and inspiring others as well. And I think teamwork is a big part of that. Confidence is a big part of that, and so is empathy. And one thing I learned a lot about this past week is respect. When interviewing my interviewee, I learned that mutual respect is something that is both important and it's beneficial to the workplace. She talked about how if you want your employees or your coworkers, your colleagues, anybody to respect you, then you need to respect them as well. Whether you have a higher title or not, respect needs to be given regardless of what title you possess. And I think that's very important. In my previous place of employment, I had a leader who I felt was a pretty good example of a leader for the most part. She expected to be respected, but she didn't do it in such a way that she wasn't going to do that in return. She was always respectful to us as well. And another thing I had thought a lot about was a real leader is not afraid to do the things that they have their employees do. Some people that consider themselves to be leaders aren't true leaders. They're just bosses that bark out orders because they expect their employees to do things, but they're too afraid to do those things themselves. A real leader will do things with the people that they are trying to lead and show everybody that they are part of a team. And I learned that it can be harder said than done to inspire people and even be in a supervisory role. I've never had a supervisory role, but I've had times where I have been able to be a leader. But what I learned most were about that I didn't really have to think about before were the challenges that came with leadership. I don't really have too much of a problem communicating with people, I don't think. I feel like I'm pretty good at that, and I'm pretty good at listening. That's not something I really struggle with too much. However, with my interviewee, those were things that she struggled with. So I learned that something that's easy for me may not be easy for someone else, and vice versa. I feel like if I were in a position where I had to discipline somebody, it sounds easy enough when talking about it, but then when you really think about what it entails, think about the fact that I might struggle with that a little bit if I ever had to do it. That's something that the leader I interviewed has to deal with from time to time. And even if she doesn't have an issue being able to go through with the discipline, sometimes you may be in a company where there's only so much you're allowed to do. So even if you feel comfortable doing something, you may not be allowed to do it. Some other things I wanted to talk about were just a couple other things that I learned this week about building trust and building relationships in the workplace. That's something I learned a little bit about. One thing that I learned from my interviewee was that a way to do that and establish trust would be just to be transparent and even apologize if you make a mistake. As a leader, I feel like if you act all high and mighty and you're above apologizing, no one's going to respect you. And that is going to change the dynamic of the workplace. So if you are able to apologize when you do something wrong, recognize that, then it's going to go a long way. I also think that honesty and, again, transparency are important, and that's something that I learned a little bit more about this week, because transparency shows the people that you are working with and leading that you respect them enough to tell them what's really going on. And that's something that my interviewee tried to do a lot.